Forget Route 66, forget the Lincoln Highway, forget even the National Road. Today, in my journey up, I am going to start driving and exploring America's original Mother Road. Well, I'm at least going to explore along it, or what remains of it. And what it is, it's a path that's so old that you need an old map like this to understand it. This is an old map. It's very simplified, but it kind of shows the original points. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to explore a little bit along this path where there's this thing called the Old Wagon Road is, and then which goes kind of like along here. I'll talk more about that in a second. Which later on branched off to this thing called the Wilderness Road, which I think kind of went like this direction of the arrow. That was good old Daniel Boone made that thing. Anyway, but what you can think about as being the original Mother Road of America is actually what we call the Great Appalachian Valley, which starts up in here and goes all along here. The Great Appalachian Valley, it goes, this pink area starts up here, way up in your Lake Champlain, up and then into Canada, goes all along here and all along here, Shenandoah Valley, goes next to the Smoky Mountains and goes all the way, actually almost down to Birmingham, Alabama, go through Chattanooga, Tennessee. And this was actually a well-known route for Indians, so even before the white man was here, they knew this route for a long time. But then later on, the Americans built their roads going through here, and there were some very important roads for exploring the wilderness. And what it was is actually a valley here between the two different ridge lines here, and which actually this map kind of shows here as some of these ridge lines. And now this is actually a very simplified map because they're not just like, these ridges don't just stick out like walls and there's nothing else in between, but it kind of gives the idea. And you can kind of look on the map here and take a look. And if I switch over to the terrain view, which, let's see, map. Okay, this is the terrain view. No, is this a terrain view? Okay, kind of screwing this up, guys. Okay, doing this on the fly. Terrain. Okay, and this, by the way, so this is the path I'm going to be taking today, going from down here in Pensacola, Florida, going up here and taking this path here, and it does go mostly through this thing called the Great Appalachian Valley here, which is, you can see, here's the hills here, here's hills here, here's a pretty flat area here, here's a little bit of a flat area here, here's a flat area here. Now you're going up here through the famous Shenandoah Valley. And what you do is you end up going through Birmingham, which, I don't know, you can maybe almost consider it like at the end of that valley. And then you go through Chattanooga, Knoxville, Roanoke, and then eventually the valley keeps going up this way, but then I'm going to make a right turn here and then go toward Fairfax, Virginia, near D.C. But anyway, it's just going to be like a 2-day trip, so I'm not going to have a lot of time to explore that much, but there is like a couple things I wanted to check out along the way. But it's a very interesting thing because you think about it, this valley was going back to this area. Okay, so if I go back to this map here, which was like from 1750, you can see here that, like, okay, that at this point a lot of these bodies of water, like the Chesapeake, the Potomac, they might have been spelled differently, but most of all these rivers were already named, and actually a lot of these counties were actually there too. Maybe some of these counties like became smaller, like you had like Fairfax County down here next to D.C., and then Prince William County, and some of these changed. But anyway, but you can see that pretty much the framework had already been laid out, you know, down here in the tidewater areas in Virginia, Delaware, New Jersey, Philadelphia is there. And but the interesting thing about it is that this road here that went through up here, and that went up here, Lancaster, near Lancaster, York, Pennsylvania, went through here. I think this is about where Gettysburg is, and then it went down here to Shenandoah Valley. It was kind of like almost like this road was almost like the poor man's express, because really what it was is this area along here was mostly all settled by these rich people from England that were all trying to set up this aristocratic area here along the coast. Is basically what it was. I mean, it was like the like, for instance, like the whole colony of Baltimore. It was like what was the guy's name? Anyway, drawing a blank on that right now. But anyway, he was Lord something in Maryland, and Lord Calverton. Yeah, so he was the guy kind of like in charge of Maryland, and then there was like some other like guys. But basically, what they were trying to do along this coastal area in the Tidewater is they were trying to actually set up a area that was going to kind of like replicate the feudal system back in England, but in America. And what it was is these were actually the younger sons of the nobility there for most part, and they came over here because they were the younger sons, so they couldn't inherit anything pretty much. So they wanted to set up their own little like serfdom here, And originally they wanted to have like it was more like it wasn't slaves that they had to begin with, but then later on when they found that like there wasn't many like these white people that really wanted to volunteer to be like the serfs over in the New World, then they ended up like turning over to slavery. But originally it wasn't. It was more like indentured servants and so forth. But anyway, so when you think about it, they started over here in England and way over here in England, and then they were more like in this area, I believe, like these noblemen who were setting up this area here along the coast, and also along. Okay, in the deep south, it was a little bit different than the Tidewater in Virginia, but it was actually still kind of like an aristocratic society that was being set up down there. Things changed over time, but what I'm talking about, this is how it started. But then what you had is this group of people that settled these Appalachians. They were coming here from like the borderlands between Scotland and England, and they were coming from Northern Ireland. They called them Ulster Scots, and conveniently we kind of labeled them all as being Scotch-Irish, although really, maybe a better term I've read in books is called Borderlanders, because they weren't really just Scot-Irish. They were also like these people from this area. Now, these are people that were always kind of like pawns, like between like England and Scotland fighting, and then a bunch of them were moved over here to Northern Ireland just to kind of like get them out of their hair and stuff like that. And they were a group that like was always in a war-torn area. They distrusted the government, and they never really they kind of knew that the government was not your friend, and you just had to kind of set up your own little clan and just whatever it was and take care of your family. And that was like a big part of like what this Appalachian culture was founded by. And so it started here with them coming along here. So what they did is a lot of them, they started out in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was Pennsylvania, and that was considered to be a real like tolerant place where they pretty much would allow people of all religions. It was kind of a utopian thing, but I guess the rules were maybe even a little strict for them, so they just kind of like said forget that. And all these guys, they went along here, this great wagon road, and they came along here, and then they started founding cities like there's Winchester, Virginia, and just towns like this, and they kind of went along here. And by the way, you can see here that like Indian Road by Treaty of Lancaster. So yeah, you can see that this was originally an Indian road, and then after some war, they got a treaty where they said they could use their road, and they kind of improved it. But by the way, I should say one thing that I thought that was kind of interesting, that down here you could even see on this map from 1750 on the Potomac here, let's see, it says, okay, this is like where Washington, D.C. is now, like up here, Rock Creek, that's this river that goes by the Washington Zoo, so that's actually where Washington, D.C. is now. But you can see Washington here. Now, this was 1750, so I think this was like Washington's, I don't think this is Mount Vernon. I think this was Washington's original home, I believe. Okay, I guess I'm not really for sure, but you can see, but it was a big enough area that it was actually on, I think this might have been his boyhood home, but it was a big enough area that it was actually listed here as being like, okay, this might actually be Mount Vernon, sorry guys. But you can see, but it was a big enough thing that this Washington, this is basically, it looks like it's a town. This is really just like his plantation here, and probably a lot of these were actually plantations, so you can see this was all, because a lot of these guys like Washington, and I'm not saying he was a bad guy, but but a lot of those guys from Virginia, like, and all that were the founders, Thomas Jefferson, they were all like, these aristocratic guys, is what it was, and then, which was in stark contrast to these people that settled out in this area and went down this great wagon road, and then they came down through these ridges here, the beginning of these mountains, and then came down here to, okay, I think this is right about like where Roanoke was later, and then this other road kind of like went off this way and became the Wilderness Road, and that was one that went more into Kentucky. Kentucky and stuff. But anyway, but I think they had this map kind of wrong, because actually they ended up going to like the Cumberland Gap, which was over here someplace. But this was 1750. They hadn't really explored that. But anyway, so then you can see this wagon road. It branches off from this mountain, and then it settles some of these areas, like in western Virginia. So some of these flat areas in western Virginia, western North Carolina, and so forth down there. And the interesting thing is what happened with that is because of that. See, these are basically then became the areas that were settled by these people of Appalachia, the Scotch-Irish, for lack of a better term, and they settled these areas, and then their descendants kind of settled these areas, and then eventually they swept across here, like into Kentucky, the Ozarks, parts of Oklahoma, and Texas, and then informs what Colin Woodard calls Greater Appalachia. So that was, if you haven't read his book, it's a very good book. It really explains America. But what he does is he kind of looks at the different regions of America, basically based on who settled those areas, and then saying that because all these areas here in this white were basically founded by descendants of these people from Greater Appalachia, from the original Appalachians, he considered it culturally to really be like that Appalachian culture. Now, we know that a lot of immigrants did come along afterward that weren't, so there was more people who weren't descended from them. But the thing is, if they were, let's say they settled into these areas, they more like mixed in and became part of that culture. And then, and so the ones that came from these areas and then later went off, someplace like the Ozarks, they would still have that kind of culture, even if they weren't originally part of that original group. And then you have the Midlands here, which was basically like the descendant of the Quaker culture, what it became. Obviously, the Quakerism, there's not much of it around anymore, but we'll just say that, but part of that culture, that kind of like Midwest culture is there. And then Yankeedom became, that was obviously that had to do with the Puritans and what became of them, and then, now we know like Puritanism also faded, and it wasn't, but some of the ideals of like government and participation and those things came around. And then, then you had some of these areas too that changed over time, but there still was certain characteristics. So anyway, the whole point of this is just, so I'm going to be going up in this area, and then, because it really interested me, the idea of this movement, this migration in America that caused these cultural divides. And so I'm not going to be able to stop a whole lot along the way, but I'm going to stop at a few places and kind of explore this original mother road, this road that, because of the way it was set up, this was the path that, if you're descended from some of these Scotch-Irish people, then, this is a road they probably would have, gone down some in this valley here, and then on either that Great Wagon Road or the branching off into the Wilderness Road, something like that. And as far as where I'm going to stop along the way, I think at least the one place I want to stop is it's going to be near Roanoke. It was called New Bern. Let's see. Okay, it's along here. I can't find it right now, but let's see. It was called okay. Two-story. Okay, so anyway, yeah, New Bern, Virginia. So I wanted to stop and see that, because that was going to explore that. And I think there was like another place. It was in a town called Christiansburg. They had some kind of like walking tour that was related to. So anyway, I'm going to try to find a few different things, like kind of like in this area where that's kind of related to that whole Wilderness Road thing, and film that. I wish I had more time to kind of explore that. But anyway, at least I will get to drive up this valley, and it should be really nice today. And then go up there. Maybe I'll try to get to this area by the evening, sleep somewhere around here in the van, and then try to, like, in the morning, kind of see some of this stuff a little bit, and then go up to the remaining 4 hours up to DC. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Bye.